Well, good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome to Linda's Through Plants for You. I want to talk a little bit today about my soil mixtures. Recently I had a issue with fungus, and I did ponder quite a few different scenarios as to what the cause of that was. And I still haven't come down to a definitive, I got it figured out kind of an answer. But in researching and trying to prevent this from happening again, I have come to the conclusion that, well, several things. One of them is I had soil that, when my husband threw all that soil outside, within days we had 8-9 inch stem mushrooms, the likes of some of what I've never seen before. These were really strange heads on these mushrooms. And we have mushrooms, we go out in the country and we get mushrooms all the time, but I've never seen any like that. So that being said, if you want to see what they look like, I think that was 2 videos ago, maybe 3. But I wanted to talk today more about the soil, not just the fungus, but the different things that I use in my soil. And for those of you that have been following me for a really long time, you might notice that some of my mixtures have changed from time to time. And that's just because at the time I'm using what I'm telling you I'm using, it's working fine. My plants are thriving, they're growing great, and but sometimes I can't always get what I want. They don't always have it at the stores around here, so I have to then, take what I can get, I guess. And one of the things that I have done many times is I have purchased all different kinds of soils, potting soil. And I haven't noticed a huge difference in any of them from brand to brand. But I do like the Fox Farm and the Black Gold. And the other one is Frog. I forget the name of it, doggone it. Happy Frog. And I don't happen to have any. Everybody's out of it. So we got the Fox Farm. But what I like about them is they're a very light and airy soil to begin with. So if one wanted to use just straight out of the bag soil from them, you could do that, and your plants are going to grow. They'll be fine. For those of us that have a lot of plants and we like to experiment and we like to use different types of soils and amendments to the soils to see what will happen, that's one of the things that I do. And I have noticed over the years when I'm repotting cactus or succulents, or even plants that aren't considered a cactus or a succulent, cacti or succulent, I like to throw some sand in there. And the reason being is it tends to break up the soil. It allows the water to move through, and they just seem to like it better. And I think that it depends on where that plant is from. And, if they're from the desert, then, well, yeah, they would like the sand in the soil. If they're from the tropics, and there are succulents, of course, from the tropics, then maybe not so much. I don't know. But I just tend to go that direction when I'm repotting things. Then we have the plants that really like the aeration, and by that I'm talking about like my Pilea peperomoides. I have her in a clay pot, and she dries out pretty quickly. But I water it. I water it very thoroughly when I water it now, because the pot is very, very full. Now, before it got very, very full, I would only water right around the plant itself, because when I went into my next size pot, I know that there was way more soil than needed to be. And one of the problems with doing that is you risk rotting the roots, because the plant can only take up so much moisture. And once it's done that, if the soil continues to be wet around it, you're going to rot the roots. So that's one little bit of information. But today I want to concentrate on orchid bark. There's been a lot of talk about orchid bark over the last year or so. I've noticed a lot of people using it, including myself. And I thought, well, why not? Because it's an amendment that it creates aeration in the soil. And anything that does that, for me, is a good, I think is a good thing. Well, I want to say about a month ago or so, I was talking to Suzette, and I said, I've been thinking about this orchid bark thing. And when I was repotting a plant, I noticed there were wet spots and dry spots in my pot. And the wet spots were where the orchid bark chunks were. And although I used the coarse blend, it's not all that coarse. It's not coarse at all, really. But everywhere where I could find heavy, spots of it, it was still wet. And, we talked about it for a while, and I think we both came to the same conclusion that maybe it's not such a good idea to be using this in our plants, because they hold the moisture. Now, if you have a plant like an orchid, maybe that works better for you. But I talked to Suzette about this because she raises orchids, and I believe she told me that she even stopped using it for her orchids. I think she's gone to the lava rock and the leca balls, and there was one other thing, I think, and I forget what it was that she mentioned, but she's moving away from the orchid bark as well for that same reason. Now, one thing she said to me, and I don't have any bags open, so I'm not going to open a bag just for the purposes of demonstration, but I just want to let you know that if you take a bowl, and take 2 bowls, or a bowl, I should say, and put your orchid bark in there right out of the bag, and it will float, because it takes quite a while for that bark to absorb that moisture, that water. Once it does, it sinks to the bottom. When you have that same orchid bark in your soil, once it starts absorbing that water, it's not going to dry out because there's no air. I mean, you get a little bit of air that goes through if you've aerated your soil very well, but not enough for that to dry out. So that orchid bark is staying wet in the soil, which can cause fungus, it can cause root rot, it can create, attract gnats. And I know a lot of us have been struggling with that problem. And I think most of you know, I've been saying for a long time now, I never had fungus gnats before, ever. I didn't even know what they were until, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago. And I've been raising plants my whole life. So I was trying to think what's different. And I thought, well, one of the things is we bring plants in from other countries. So maybe they don't, we're getting too many of them and there's not enough natural predators. But when I bring a plant in the house and it doesn't have any problems, and I put it in new soil, I don't see an influx. I don't notice any fungus gnats. Sometimes there's eggs in the soil, okay? And if you don't repot it when you first get it home, and a lot of us don't, those eggs can hatch, a week, 7 to 10 days later. And my understanding is one gnat can lay up to 300 eggs. So you can imagine what that's going to create. So as far as the orchid bark goes, I have 2 bags, brand new bags. My hubby was so kind to go pick up for me a couple weeks ago. But I have decided not to use that in my houseplants anymore. I'm going to save it for my outdoor plants, my window boxes and my front porch, because there it isn't going to matter. When, in fact, it probably would help a lot for me to do that because, you know, my husband had to water every single day this summer because it was so hot and dry. And I think if I have the orchid bark in there, that will help keep that soil moist. And I don't think we'll have the same issue as we would have as if I'm using it in the house. So I would just say if you're using orchid bark in your plants, I wouldn't do that anymore. If you've used it and you aren't having any issues, then you have no reason to change. And I'm not saying that it's bad for everybody. I'm just saying this has been my experience, and I'm going to try it. And I will let you guys know down the road, you know, a few months down the road, especially now we're going into winter, and things are getting, you know, closed up in here, and we don't have as much fresh air moving around. And so I'll let you know. I'll give you an update on if that has helped at all where the fungus gnats are concerned. I don't have any fungus gnats right now, and I hope I don't. I wish I'd never get them again, but I know as long as I own plants, I'm probably going to have stragglers here and there. So, but that's all I wanted to say today. And again, you know, as far as soil, I don't think it's that important the brand that you use. I try to stay away from the ones that have fertilizer in them, but I'm noticing I can't find them without it anymore. It's becoming a real problem. And honestly, I don't think they put enough in there for it to matter. But, you know, if you buy soil with fertilizer and then you fertilize on top of that, you run the risk of over-fertilizing. And those are those little green or blue or teal colored balls you'll see in your soil. Those are fertilizer capsules. And they're meant to be slow release. And some, I think Miracle Grows are up to, is it 6 months, I think? So you can imagine how many are in there if it's meant to feed your plant for 6 months. So I tend to stay away from that if I can. But like I said, it's unfortunately, they're all starting to do that now. So just be careful that you don't over-fertilize after repotting with fresh soil. And then as far as the soil mixtures, years ago I used to own a plant store and I made my own soil mixtures. And it was, I believe it was like 60% topsoil. And I'm saying topsoil, that's not a mistake. I went to a very you know, top grade greenhouse, and I purchased topsoil in a big plastic garbage bin. And I took that back to my plant store, and I would take that and put it in these big gallon bags, Ziploc bags, and I would mix it with, the other 40% was perlite and vermiculite. I never hear vermiculite being used anymore, and I'm not too sure why, but that was a good mixture. I never had any bugs, I never had any problems. And the perlite is, it's lava rock is all it is. So it's hard. And although it does absorb some moisture, it acts as an aeration in your soil. So it keeps your soil loose and aerated. And the vermiculite is that little silver stuff, silver gold color, and you can squeeze it with your fingernail or your tooth. You can feel it. It's kind of spongy feeling. And that soaks up the moisture. So there again, there's a fine line between, do you really want that in there? Because if it's soaking up the moisture and it's staying wet, that might defeat the purpose. The key here is each plant is different. Each plant's roots are different. How they grow and absorb and how their photosynthesis works is different. So that is all very important to know about the plant that you're potting before you pot it, because that's going to make a difference as to what you use in that mix. Oh, and I've also used the river rock that I get at Lowe's. It's like $4.99 for a container, a plastic container, and it goes a long way. And when I really want a lot of aeration, like with my euphorbias, I've got on my table, because they don't get enough light, and I can't fix that because I have nowhere else to put it, and it's in a big tray, in a big round tray. You can see that in past videos as well. But in that instance, I use a lot of that river rock and very little soil. So it just, like I said, really depends on the plant itself. Aloe too, that's another one. Not good to put in all soil. So I guess all I can say is we need to do our research, and I try when I'm highlighting a plant, I do try to remember to touch on that, but that's not always the same for everybody either. And the last thing I want to say is, in the background here you can see my Frydek, and let me see if I can get a close-up there. The 2 leaves on the bottom, they're done. But look at the top ones. They're big, they're healthy, they're gorgeous. And you'll see my past videos, I was struggling with what I believe to be spider mites, and I think I just over-treated this, because I treated it and then I treated it again, and I probably put too much on, but not necessarily. It may just be that it just was its time to go. It got tired of fighting. So that is my update on my Frydek, and I got my fingers crossed. I'm going to cut those old leaves off, and I'm going to put her back where she was and hope that I continue to get new growth. And that's about it. And then behind there you can see my Hoya, my Crimson Princess, and those are growing like a weed as well. Alright, so that's about it for today. I'm going to be bringing some repotting videos here in the near future, and I hope you'll all come back to see that. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great day, and if you got any questions or comments, let us know. Let us know what works for you. And just remember, be kind in your response, and do something nice for somebody today. A lot of stress going on in the world, and people are just, I don't know, everybody's so stressed out. So let's try and help each other through these times, okay? All right. You all have a great day, and I will be back. Bye now.